Hello, I'm Joseph Vrenick.
I'm Tanner Richard Kraft.
I'm Austin Zwiebelman.
Rein here.
And welcome to the Bomb Squad podcast, the podcast that's the equivalent of being the last sailor in line behind a whore. That's not a critique of our podcast. That's actually a reference to the movie that we are going to be talking about today, The Specials, the movie from the year 2000, directed by Craig Mazin and written by James Gunn. We're going to be talking about this in anticipation for his upcoming movie, The Suicide Squad.
Wait, The Specials? I thought we were talking about Mystery Men. What a ripoff.
I mean, they shot around the same time, but Mystery Men came out first, so...
What? You guys said we were going to do something classy. I thought we were doing the Chernobyl miniseries from HBO. What the fuck?
Same guy.
Yeah, same guy. Craig Mazin was the showrunner for Chernobyl, and...
Superhero movie.
Also directed superhero movie, but most importantly, he wrote the movie Rocket Man from 1997 with Harlan Williams.
Was that before or after he was roommates with Ted Cruz?
Good question.
Wait, what?
Mazin was roommates with Ted Cruz and he shits on him on Twitter all the time.
I didn't realize that was the same guy. Holy shit.
Craig Mazin, what a guy. All right, so we'll get started by actually kind of starting to talk about the movie. It's kind of useless to ask you guys whether or not you guys had seen this prior, because I'm almost 100% certain you guys have seen this for the first time. This movie's pretty obscure.
What are you talking about? This is my favorite movie of all time.
But yes, so... This is an obscure movie. It's hard to find. There's only like 5,000 copies available of the Blu-ray on La La Land Records. We're gonna dive into the first question that I have prepped. Our boy James Gunn. We're gonna talk about him a little bit. We can all agree that he's a pretty good writer and a fascinating one at that. Let's kind of avoid talking about him as a director. Save that for maybe the Suicide Squad. What are you guys' thoughts and opinions on James Gunn, the writer? We'll start with Austin.
According to commentary on this rare Blu-ray, Joe was nice enough to lend the group. This movie was written in like 2 to 3 weeks.
I was living in New York at the time. I wrote The Specials in 2 or 3 weeks.
And I think it's a piece of satire about how celebrity turns icons into assholes. It's pretty okay. There's this point in the movie where Weevil goes up to this group called the Crusaders, which are the more popular superhero group, well above the Specials, funded by the CIA. And the member of the Crusaders he's talking to is actually just like talking about getting pussy and selling toys just more intensely than the Specials. It's actually a pretty solid. Did any of you know that Alan Moore and James Gunn were likely the same age when they wrote their superhero satires? They were both 33. Watchmen, the Specials.
That's actually interesting you say that, because I shit you not. I was planning at some point to compare The Specials, the movie we watched, to the 2019 Watchmen miniseries. We'll get to that when we get to that. I have a reason for comparing the two. It actually makes sense, but we'll get to that.
Back on Gunn as a writer, I actually liked a lot of the gags. I'm sorry, I grew up in the aughts. This is like where I used to swim. Some of the gags were pretty well set up. They had callbacks. Strobe's speech about pissing on somebody, getting misconstrued by U.S. Bill. The 8 being a CIA creation, which is harkened back to when the diner owner is like, where was that person when JFK was killed? You know, there was like a little bit of heavy lifting in the screenplay that was written in 2 to 3 weeks. But another thing that's more like on topic with Gunn, there's little bits of like relatable stuff. Like, we're from the Midwest, Gunn's supposedly from here, and there's like those relatable beats where it's like somebody getting hit with the zipper in a pillow fight, or someone having like a piss dot on their pants when they come out of a bathroom. It's like, this guy's human. This movie wasn't made by committee. This is shit from like your lifetime thrown in the script. And most of all, you know, trauma entertainment. This is Gunn being strange and writing weird, like, one-off shit that doesn't have callbacks. It's just supposed to wallop you with how weird it is. He's a provocative dude. It has these one-off jokes that are like a mock's plan to all pets after the Specials break up. Orphan Alien being just unpredictable and nuts the whole time. The story about the superhero who could whack people with his scrotum. Like, it's very, like, prototypical Gunn. Yeah, it's pretty in tune with what I expect of Gunn early on in his career as it was.
Hell yeah. Tanner, we'll go to you next.
He's very interesting as a writer because this is going to sound insane. My favorite James Gunn script is Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. I think that is him at his best as a writer, as deranged and as lunatic that sounds. I have a letterbox review of the second Scooby-Doo movie where I call it both the perfect satirical and deconstruction of the Scooby-Doo mythos and Saturday morning cartoons, while being the penultimate, most ultimate example of the exact thing it's deconstructing at the same time. It's biting satire, but perfectly sincere all in one. It is a masterstroke of writing using established properties and using typically more children-centric, teen-centric, younger audience-centric type of characters and themes, sort of similar to the specials, as, you know, superheroes are inherently supposed to be for children. They were invented for children. And as much as man babies on the internet want to say they're only for adults, superheroes' target audience is mostly younger people. And I think the specials is an interesting satire, not really so much of superheroes, but as like Austin said earlier, of just how being a celebrity kind of makes you an asshole. As someone who was once a cult internet celebrity, let me tell you, it kind of makes you an asshole. I think Gunn's a super talented writer, and I think a lot of what I like about this movie is present in the writing. There were some directing moments from Craig Mazin that I thought were relatively strong, but I think the most interesting stuff comes from the screenplay. A lot of the good gags and stuff like that. Like the one scene, I'm pretty sure this screams Gunn, where Sean Gunn's character, the alien orphan, when they were like ordering alcohol out of nowhere, alien orphan just says in like perfect English, "A Bloody Mary." Vrenick was watching this with me. I think I laughed the hardest at that line.
Yes,
yeah. So I think everything that makes this movie great is within the screenplay, and I think Gunn is an incredibly talented writer. Watch Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, because it's a masterpiece. I'm not even kidding.
Rein, what are your thoughts
on James Gunn as a writer? So I feel like a sort of good analogy might be like James Gunn as a writer as like a Pokemon. Like James Gunn of today, this is like the fully evolved Charizard. He's just amazing. He's the little Charmander. Late James Gunn, he's like the master at mixing like tragedy and comedy together into like this perfect blend where like you're laughing and crying, all the emotions at once. I think he's the expert at just like super weird, out there, colorful characters with a lot of depth and stuff. Whereas early James Gunn, that entertainment and just like that weird out there, like who would think of that sort of energy is there, but like there's a lot of depth that's sort of lacking. And I think it's kind of interesting to see it if you're more used to his latter work to come back to stuff like Romeo and Juliet and the specials and stuff, where he's still developing that, trying to like add that extra oomph to his scripts. A good analogy is I feel like these are all very colorful, interesting cardboard cutouts of characters. Kind of. That's the feeling I got. There's not a lot of depth to them other than like their weird personality quirks, but they're very fun, entertaining personality quirks. That's, I guess, gives my hints on what I think of some of his earlier work. I guess to balance it out, he's probably like my favorite director right now, / writer right now, for doing big budget or tentpole stuff. So I just want to point that out before the pitchforks get raised at me.
Too late. I have a CIA death squad en route to your house.
There's a sniper right outside the window behind you, Rein. Any last words?
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
That's the epitaph. Oh, thank goodness.
All right. So I'll get into my thoughts here. I'll keep it as brief as possible because you guys kind of covered a lot of what I love about Gunn just as both a filmmaker and a writer. I've said it before in a previous podcast. James Gunn's my favorite filmmaker. That's why I'm hosting this podcast. That's also why I'm hosting the Suicide Squad podcast. Like, I love this man to death. One of the things that I think really makes Gunn a fantastic writer, and it's probably why I relate to his work a lot, is that he knows how to write losers well. He knows how to write the rebel, the oddball, the outcast, the geek. I threw in a reference to the movie. He also knows how to write abuse victims, trauma victims in a way that is not like over the top. He gives them quirks. He gives them a sense of humor, but he still manages a way to like take all of like those quirks and like those jokes that he'll give those characters and still make them human in a much more relatable way than hell most dramas even do. That's what I really love about Gunn as a writer. And the specials is kind of like his first, I wouldn't say like a giant step into that realm of how he writes those characters, but it's a good baby step. Like this is very, very early on Gunn, and it shows a lot of promise for all of the movies that he will later write and direct, where he would eventually perfect it in Super, which might actually just be my favorite movie ever. It's definitely my favorite Gunn movie. Another example that when I showed Steven Tronachik this movie, he felt that this was a proto Guardians of the Galaxy. And yeah, it definitely kind of shows. I think it's a more proto Suicide Squad than anything. I got more vibes of that here. But this leads to the next question. What did you guys think of the movie overall? Tanner, we'll start with you.
Thought it sucked. No, I'm kidding. I actually really enjoyed it. I had a pretty good time with it. I remember when you said, oh, the movie's about over, I was like, what? What do you mean? 30 minutes have passed. Because it was really well paced. I think the pacing of the movie is really great. And I think to me, what I really like this movie is compared to something like other types of satires of superhero movies is that it's not even in earnest trying to be your traditional superhero movie, which granted in the year 2000, there wasn't really a superhero movie mold yet. We had what?
X-Men literally came out the year that the specials came out.
Yeah, and then before that, you have like what? Blade, the Superman movies, the Batman movies. Like, there wasn't really a quote-unquote mold of what a superhero movie could be yet. But even within what little kind of pre-established genre things there were before at this point, it's real light in that kind of things. I read the plot synopsis on Wikipedia about how it was just following a group of superheroes on their quote-unquote day off, which doesn't quite sound correct considering it's about the most eventful time in their life, but...
Well, to be fair, they're also the 7th best superhero team in the world, so...
6th or 7th.
Oh yeah, that's right, 6th or 7th.
We're not quite sure.
I imagine they just have like a lot of days where they're just lounging about their house / headquarters that they would just consider days off.
Yeah, I think the thing I really like about this movie is that it portrays people in a superhero team not necessarily as these best friend types, but as co-workers. You don't hate your co-workers usually, but you're not exactly their greatest friends on the earth. You're just like, yeah, they're fine. I don't dislike their presence. Their presence is fine. I'm not exactly going to go out and get a beer with them right afterwards. And of course, there are like cliques within this little group that is more friendly than other ones. But it felt more akin to an office job than it did a family, if that makes sense.
Right.
In a way, it's almost like the most dysfunctional family that works together in an office. It's really unique in that sense. I haven't really seen a superhero movie like this, or any type of movie with superpowered characters quite like this. I think it was pretty good. I gave it like a 3.5 stars on Letterboxd or something like that. I think the comedy for the most part is pretty good. I don't recall a single transphobic joke off the top of my head, which thank God, because Lord knows if you watch any comedy in the 2000s, usually there's at least 3. There wasn't in this movie, at least that I noticed. But I really enjoyed this movie for what it was. I think that all the characters had good chemistry. I think there was a nice, very human, very, very human through line with the you were cheating on my wife sort of thing. And this was supposed to be this great big step for us. Honestly, as someone who is a creative type, who is an aspiring actor, filmmaker, I found it too familiar. It was eerily familiar in the sense of we got this action figure deal and almost felt like, oh, we got our big break. It's like that episode of Friends where Joey gets to be a butt double. It's a weird comparison, but it's like, oh, this is my big break, but your big break doesn't mean it's not shit. It's not all glamorous. It's not all sunshines and rainbows. So there's a lot to like about this movie, even if not a lot happens per se. It's just a very much sort of enjoy the ride type of movie. It's honestly reminiscent of a lot of Linklater movies, which I love because Linklater is my favorite director, where it's not so much about an overarching plot as it is just following some characters on this day of their life. So I really liked it in that regard. I think it's a really solid movie, and this should have been a sign that Craig Mazin was always capable of great things.
Okay. Austin, what did you think of the movie overall?
Well, I started having Vietnam flashbacks when Better Days by Citizen King comes on in the opening. I was like, oh, Mom, let's go to the pool today. All my friends are going to be there. It's weird watching this like $1 million sort of first-time director superhero movie now that we live in an age where everybody throws so much more fucking money at superhero properties. Like, at the end, it made logical sense. I was just expecting a sequence where they go beat the shit out of Weevil. And then, you know, the payoff was basically just one member of the press following Rob Lowe and giving him the Batman Forever treatment. Oh, your suit has nipples on it. Suck dick, you know?
Are those nipples on your costume?
Save for the toy commercial, it's mostly just a superhero sitcom with minimal action involved. And the film's catharsis seems like it was for Gen Xers of a certain age who really like hearing speeches about how rejects and geeks should have their day in the sun too.
We may not be the prettiest, or the smartest, or the most powerful, but we don't exist for the beautiful people of the world, Ted.
Like, that's an old thing that also gave me flashbacks to the 2000s. The amount of gags in this film was commendable. This was like some Zucker Brothers shit. They really throw a lot of stuff at the wall. And also, I don't know if this is like just a thing Gunn was born good at doing, but they do like world building. The things they choose to have characters randomly off doing is like, it reminds you of stuff they couldn't show in the movie. Like opening where they're talking about the female member who just quit. It's just a lot of instances of that. It's certainly an okay film. Usually it's cutaway gags and references to off-screen stories are sometimes better than the humor produced by the main plot. But it's like, the film is 1 hour and 22 minutes. I think maybe entirely shot on film. They barely show anybody using their superpowers. This is one of those examples that feels like it was a script written around material limitation. Like, can you make a film out of people in costumes on location talking? The answer is yes. You got James Gunn. Like, there's a checklist. The band breaks up and gets back together. Some of them have sex. There's a dance number. And I do agree with what Joe said about, like, he knows how to write geeks and outcasts because, holy shit, everyone's so horny in this movie.
They don't make them like this anymore, man.
Everyone wants to fuck Jordan Ladd. All right, Rein.
All right, so I feel like the thing that like may have enjoyed most about this movie was not even a factor of the writing or the directing, but just like how I kind of like appreciated how cheap it was. Like, it felt like it was made for like $4 or something. It would have been more expensive just to like get a nice meal from McDonald's than it would have been to make this movie. Like, I thought there was like a lot of charm. Like, oh, here's all these actors you sort of recognize. Like, you don't know their names, but like you've seen them in a thing, you're pretty sure. Being able to like make a movie through being able to tell a story through just some fun writing, some good enough directing. That charm really it'll drive a lot of my entertainment value from this. I feel like I was saying about early James Gunn, I do think it's a very entertaining movie. Very it's able to ride on its quirkiness, good deal. It's arguably over reliant on being quirky, but I don't know, I feel like there's worse things I guess you could say about a movie. I kind of like how you don't really see much of the superhero stuff. I always really like the intersection between big grand superhero stories and just mundane everyday drama. I'm just like a sucker for that crap. If I had a criticism, it might be like the movie might be too simple. Like, I was wanting more. Like, it was like, oh, it's already like, yeah, like what Tanner was saying earlier. It's like, I was shocked when I was watching on a computer, when my cursor hovered over the screen. It's like, oh, it's already like 2/3 over. Like, it feels like it's been like 10 minutes. You can argue either a strength or a negative. In conclusion, pretty good movie. It's very interesting within James Gunn's like to appreciate as one piece of his evolution. And then maybe the biggest weakness of this movie might be seeing it now in 2021, because just like how many superhero critiques and parodies we've seen since now. Like, I'm sure a lot of the jokes probably held up better, you know, when we weren't so over-indicated with it. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
All right. So Austin had mentioned the low budget of this, how the script kind of feels like they had to work around just having no budget whatsoever. I guess fun question for you guys. Could you tell when watching this that Sheena's Secret was inspired by this? I guess for context's sake, it's not out yet. It's not even out in the festival circuit. It's almost finished, though. I wrote a movie called Sheena's Secret about a teenager who has superpowers, and we made it for maybe about like $1,000. And one of the inspirations when I did the rewrite was the specials because of how it uses its I want to say it's like estimated $1 million for its budget. So like even for 2000, this was a fucking cheap movie. But yeah, wanted to throw that out there. So my thoughts on the movie, I recommended that we watch it. So of course, I love it for a lot of the reasons everyone had mentioned already. The gags in this are, some of them can be a bit miss, and then others are like up there in, I would say like top 15 gags that Gunn has ever done. There's a couple that break into that. Tanner had mentioned how the characters just feel like co-workers as opposed to a family, which for me, having watched all of Gunn's work, I felt that was kind of refreshing in a sense, because now we're just used to with Guardians 2, and I'm the only one that's seen it, so I can confirm the Suicide Squad even. We're kind of used to them, like the quirky outsiders who don't get along at first but become a family trope that he's kind of been known for. Hell, it's even present in the Scooby-Doo movies. It's very refreshing to see a movie where it's just like people just kind of tolerate each other in a James Gunn script. I won't get too deep into it because I think I think you guys kind of covered a lot of what I really like about it, so I will just move on to the next question. So this movie is an ensemble movie.
What? Who else is going to tell me this?
I tried to tell you, Tanner, but you weren't paying attention. So this movie is an ensemble movie with a ton of wonderful characters played by a ton of actors who had started their careers or were just beginning their careers. So I have to ask, because there are plenty of different characters in it, what was your favorite character? We'll start with Austin.
A lot of them are kind of likable, and the one I choose is not exactly very likable, but it was mostly because we got to watch him go through the most things. It would be Thomas Hayden Church as the Strobe, because he at least gets to go through like one meaningful like phase change. Like when he stands up for the group at the toy premiere, even though that was almost entirely motivated by him being a cuckold, it was still like revealed later when Weevil deflects from the specials over to the Crusaders that he really does care about the specials somewhat. Watching him on the fly try to make Nightbird's powers seem like they're, worthwhile was actually kind of like heartfelt. Yeah, it was just that everybody else was so thinly drawn, like one-note joke, that it was like, I gotta go for the person with two jokes. Goes from Alec Baldwin and Malice God Complex over to being a less annoying version of Alec Baldwin.
That's a great description.
You ask me if I have a God complex? Let me tell you something. I am God.
All right, Rein, how about you? Who was your favorite character?
Oh man, so this joke is going to be hilarious for like the two people who have seen a lot of Naruto and the specials. I thought it was very interesting that Pain made an appearance in this movie before, like 10 years before he showed up in Naruto. I thought that was very weird. Of course, I am talking about Multiple Man, or the person who was like 8 people, like one mind. I thought that was a fun gimmick, just like all these people, just all these random actors. Like the gimmick was fun. On top of that, like how there was like actually some heart to the character, like how their one trace, I actually do care about you guys, and just I'm not great at trying to communicate the right thing, but I'm trying to do the right thing. Maybe that spoke to me now. I'm just realizing that as I'm saying it. Obviously, the worst character is Jamie Kennedy, because hey, Jamie Kennedy, Blue Man, for those unaware. A very honorable mention to Ghost Girl, because she's fun.
Girl, you mean Deadly Girl?
Yeah, Deadly Girl.
Judy Greer, who Tanner did not realize was Judy Greer until the credits rolled.
How? I went, that was Judy Greer?
Yeah.
To be fair, it's like the opposite of the character she normally plays.
She nailed it, honestly. It's very different from her Ant-Man character, which is unfortunately the thing I first think of when I think of Judy Greer.
I was going to say, that's the next thing that you think of.
I feel like she deserves better than that, but...
The first thing I think of is her Eric Andre interview.
Oh my goodness. Did you want a hot dog?
All right. Tanner, now that we got through Reigns, who's your favorite character?
Austin stole my answer. I'm kidding. It's kind of hard not to pick the one character that actually does go through somewhat of a character arc throughout the movie relative to everyone else. A lot of people say kind of Static and Thomas Hayden Church, who, by the way, I thought actually gave a very a pretty good performance, given the fact that the material wasn't exactly the most amazing. I can act with this material. I thought he did a lot of good stuff with it and made his character very engaging. I could always tell the sort of inner conflict with him from the start. I think he did a great job. So, you know, the strobe, that's pretty great. I want to shout out some other characters. Sean Gunn made me feel sick to my stomach. The entire time I just thought his poor neck muscles must be on fire because the thing he has to do with that hurts your muscles. So God bless him for it. I want to shout out, you know, Joe, you said, oh, it's all these actors at the beginning of their careers with like one notable exception, which is Rob fucking Lowe.
Yeah, Rob Lowe had a career by this point, and
he was a part of the Brat Pack.
And so did Melissa Joan Hart, who gets like 5th billing in the trailer and is only in one scene.
Yeah, that was random. I was like, is that Melissa Joan Hart? So, you know, that was kind of just out there. But I really like Rob Lowe. Bird Girl, I thought, was another character. Because, you know, as we are all here, we do enjoy the occasional superhero of movie, I think you would say. So seeing the fangirl become a superhero feels like me as a kid playing in the backyard with all my imaginary friends in these complex storylines. It felt like some kind of storyline I would come up with in my backyard. And I know that sounds like an insult, but I mean that as the most sincerest compliment possible. Oh, one last thing. James Gunn in this movie is like the most normal person. Like the guy that seems to have the least amount of damage. I thought he did a good job. James Gunn should like act more. He was good.
Yeah, I would agree.
He's surprisingly decent.
Okay, so now that we've all gone through your guys' favorite characters, I'll list off a couple of mine. I do agree with Austin and Tanner. Thomas Hayden Church, he absolutely gets the most to do out of really anybody in the cast. He actually goes through like an arc. He seems to also really be having a lot of fun with that role too. So Thomas Hayden Church, wonderful actor. He can be pretty charismatic, but he can also be kind of like emotionally reserved at times. Like he's not the most emotionally expressive. However, I would say that this is one of those roles where that's like kind of the exception because he's very optimistic, angry, kind of snotty. We were actually talking about, because I watched this with Tanner, I sat through his first experience with it, like that whole monologue that he gives at the beginning, you know, he is clearly having a lot of fun delivering what is one of the most insane monologues ever, where he's talking about, if I piss on a prostitute and I get on the front page, a little boy will see it, then piss on his sister's cunt, and then it'll become gangrenous, and we'll have to chop off the leg. Superpowers come super responsibility, damn it. You know, he's clearly having a lot of fun just hamming that up and trying to make that sound super inspirational. I got to agree with you guys there. Judy Greer's the one that I kind of relate to as far as like the concept of viewing these people as co-workers. I'm just there. I'm here to do whatever I need to do. I do not care. So I kind of related to her in that sense. James Gunn as a minute man, not minute man. He's also up there. He's pretty good. I agreed with Tanner. He should act more. I'll end it with this. I do kind of agree with Rein as far as his thoughts on Jamie Kennedy. He's not the best in this. Tanner, you got something to say?
No, he's not the best in anything.
Tanner's got something to say.
I thought Jamie Kennedy played a great asshole.
You're so aggressive.
You're 12-stepping me to death here, bitch.
Not appropriate.
But I can't believe I forgot to mention this because this is the reason why I tweeted James Gunn while we were watching the movie. U.S. Bill, also a standout. Because I convinced myself that character was autistic. So,
he does kind of read as autistic.
I tweeted James Gunn asking him if he did that on purpose.
I mean, it was the 2000s, so it probably was not intentional. We'll never know unless he tweets at us.
Yeah, we'll never know. James Gunn tweeted us.
Tweet at us, James, please. Also come on the show. That'd be really awesome.
And also, it's funny that U.S. Bill was played by the story editor of Scrubs.
One last thing, because we were talking about Nightbird. Nightbird has a quote in this that I relate to my experience with film school. So she goes in to turn in her superhero uniform at Specials HQ, and she says to Miss Indestructible, I joined because I wanted to be a superhero, but all you guys care about is sex, your egomanias, and your toy lines. That's how I feel about film school. Is I came to make movies, but all you guys care about is your egomanias and sex. Okay, now that we've gotten through favorite characters, the real biting question that I have for all of you guys is, now that you've seen it, would you recommend that people seek this thing out? Is it worth the effort to try and find this thing? I'll start with Rein. Well, that'll be his question.
I would say, honestly, it's probably really only worth it if like you're just a massive James Gunn fan, you really want to see their evolution, like I was saying. You know, you're gonna love all of it. Or if you're just a big sucker for like superhero parodies, like superhero critique sort of stuff that sort of pokes fun at superheroes. If that's you're just a sucker for that stuff, then I'd say try and check this one out. Otherwise, it's good, but you don't need not the end of the world if you never see it. Okay,
Austin, what about you? Would you recommend people check this out?
Yeah. I'm like a level 3 film historian. I'm like a level 3 boss. And so I feel obligated to recommend this to people because it's sort of like a weird prototype superhero film made for barely any money before superhero films hit the big Marvel train and got profitable. Like there's that aughts humor that isn't around anymore with that distinctive gross out element. Everybody's talking about sex way too much. It's like a nice time capsule to how weird that decade was, how different everyone behaved. I recommend people this one film, 84 Charlie Mopic, right? It's this Vietnam War found footage film. Like way before the found footage craze with Blair Witch, right? This feels like about one of those like hidden gems, kind of like 84 Charlie Mopic. It's like, hey, did you know there's this fucking weird indie film about superheroes acting like coworkers? Nobody does. I think this would be fine. Like, it's not a bad film. But most of all, I want to recommend this people to spite Rob Lowe, because he tried to distance himself from this film because he got picked up by the West Wing and didn't want this to be his fucking image, okay? He tried to step away from this shit. So now, for the sake of this, I think everybody should watch this.
All right, Tanner. Well, how about you? Do you think people should seek this out?
I was going to give a very nuanced answer, and then Austin said that thing about Rob Lowe, so I think all nuance is thrown out the window. Fuck you, Rob Lowe. What the fuck? Listen, actors are in weird indie movies at the beginning of their career sometimes, all right? Just because you get to suck Aaron Sorkin's cock on the West Wing doesn't mean you get to pretend like you didn't get into this weird movie, all right, you fucking neoliberal asshole. So go watch the specials just to spite James Gunn. Or spite Rob Lowe. Do it to spite James Gunn, even if it doesn't spite him. You're going to try anyway. On a more serious note, I think it's worth seeking out. The question is that I didn't have to try. I didn't have to try to hunt it down. I feel like from the impression Rein gives me, it's actually hard to track down. For example, you can't rent this on like Prime Video or anything. It's not on there.
It isn't.
So
the only options that are available are an out-of-print Mill Creek DVD, and then there's the recent, as of last year, the 20th anniversary Blu-ray released by La La Land Records, and there's only 5,000 copies that they made.
But they're still selling them because apparently Vrenick bought it as soon as possible because he was afraid they would sell like hotcakes, and apparently they're still selling.
So here's the thing about La La Land Records. I'll just kind of go on a spiel about this because we're actually doing pretty well on time. La La Land Records, they make limited release like soundtracks and Blu-rays, and they sell really fast. So I was afraid that, if I don't like buy it on day one, I'm gonna miss my chance to own it on Blu-ray, and it's gonna cost like a shit ton of money on eBay. Not the fucking case. I could have waited. Yeah, that's how obscure this movie is that nobody's rushing out to buy the Blu-ray of it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really about a effort versus reward thing. I'm not going to act like this movie's a masterpiece or anything, because again, 3.5 stars out of 5. It's not a bad movie. It's a good movie. I would say it's a good movie. I liked it a lot. It's just not so exceptional that I question if it's worth the effort to go out of your way to seek it out. But, you know, I almost feel like I have to because I can't think of another movie like it.
I guess one quick question for you, Tanner. You said you were going to compare this to Watchmen.
Oh, right. Let me explain that. When I was watching the show, specifically around the time we got to the Crusader scene with Rob Lowe being like, I'd like to sell out and suck your cock. I don't know where that accent came from, but when we got around to that scene, I remember there was another thing I've seen recently that made it feel like, being a superhero is all about, it's not less about being a superhero and it's more about your image and your brand. What did I watch recently that reminded me of this? And I realized it this morning. It was the Watchmen TV show, specifically the flashback episode where Regina King, takes all those nostalgia pills or whatever. And then she goes, she lives her great-grandfather's life. When her great-grandfather, Hooded Justice, joins that, the Minutemen, I think they were, that original superhero team, he discovers that the other people in it, they're not interested in fighting for justice. They're interested in their brand. They're interested in the public recognition. They're interested in sex. It's very similar to what a lot of aspects of the specials are in an absolutely batshit insane way. So it's why it was really interesting you brought up the Gunn Moore thing, because there's a little kernel there. Because that's also kind of present in the original Watchmen about how it's more about your brand and being in a costume and having public recognition than it was about being a hero. It's such an interesting thing because it feels like such an obvious critique of superheroism that I feel like I don't see a lot of satire do. I wonder if it's because it's too obvious. I don't know, but it's just an aspect of it I noticed.
All right, well, as far as my opinions go as to whether or not I would recommend it, I would absolutely recommend people seek this out. I think this movie is quite ahead of its time, especially considering that this, again, was made in the year 2000 and is a biting commentary on superhero films and just comic book superheroes in general. Like, right on the pulse of the comic book movie boom, because again, the year that this came out, X-Men came out and basically kicked off the comic book movie boom that we've been living in for the past 20 years. And plus, it's also a nice little time capsule of the early 2000s, late 90s. It's also a nice little thing to go back and just kind of watch, knowing where James Gunn would go as a filmmaker, and also just a lot of these actors. Thomas Hayden Church, get Wings and George of the Jungle before that, but then, oh hey, a few years later, Sideways, Spider-Man 3. Judy Greer was not a name at this point, and then she became, later on in her career, a very famous character actor. Fucking Jenna Fisher shows up for one scene.
Were they married at this point?
No, from what I understand, they weren't married yet.
From what I remember in the commentary, they kind of met on the set of the specials.
There's a reporter in the scene where they're doing the toy thing. There's a reporter somewhere in there who I think was Jenna Fisher's husband after James Gunn.
Interesting.
The St. Louis special, as we like to call it.
But yeah, this was years before her big break on The Office, so it's a nice little time capsule in that regard. So I would absolutely recommend that people check it out.
Fuck you.
And that, I think, is going to wrap it up for the Specials podcast. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and watched this. I highly doubt that this is going to track as far as views go because of how obscure it is, but you never know. Thank you for watching anyways. If you liked the video, please hit that like button. If you're new here and want to see more, hit that subscribe button. If you want to know when our next videos come out, as soon as they come out, hit the bell icon. We're talking about The Green Knight next week. Is that our next week video?
Unfortunately.
Finally, cinema.
Next week, I don't know who all here is going to be on it. I'm not going to be on it. They're going to be talking about the A24 film, The Green Knight. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you all later. And never forget, in these times of hardship, please remember, we are Groot. Peace, bitches.
Leave a comment below.
Oh, okay. Peace, bitches. You get two.
They slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."